A Russian mercenary chief was reportedly on board a plane that crashed, and a new arms sale to Taiwan. All of that and more today, August 24th, 2023. Good morning, early birds. I'm Jonathan Lehrfeld, and this is the Early Bird Brief, produced by Defense News and Military Times. First up, a developing story. A Russian agency says mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin was on board a plane that crashed in Russia yesterday. According to Russia's civil aviation agency, all 10 people on the plane died. Prigozhin is the founder of the Wagner private military group, which fought alongside Russia's regular army in Ukraine. His fate has been the subject of intense speculation since he mounted a short-lived mutiny against Russia's military leadership in late June. The Kremlin said Prigozhin would be exiled to Belarus. According to officials cited by Russia's state news agency TASS, a plane carrying 3 pilots and 7 passengers that was flying from Moscow to St. Petersburg went down almost 185 miles north of the Russian capital. A reporter asked President Joe Biden if Russian President Vladimir Putin was behind it.
There's not much that happens when Russia and Putin are not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
Russia's civilian aviation regulator quickly reported that Prigozhin was on the manifest. It later said that, according to the airline, he was indeed on board. A Russian-appointed official in a partially occupied region of Ukraine said he talked to Wagner commanders who also confirmed Prigozhin was on the plane, along with his top associate as well. Even if Prigozhin's death is confirmed, it is unlikely to have an impact on Russia's war in Ukraine. His troops pulled back from frontline action in late May. Russia's investigative committee is investigating the crash. Flight tracking data reviewed by the Associated Press showed a private jet registered to Wagner that Prigozhin had used previously took off from Moscow yesterday evening and that its transponder signal disappeared minutes later. Earlier this week, Prigozhin posted his first recruitment video since the mutiny. He said that Wagner is conducting reconnaissance and search activities and making Russia even greater on all continents and Africa even more free. Meanwhile, Russian media has reported, citing anonymous sources, that a top Russian general linked to Prigozhin was dismissed from his position as the commander of Russia's Air Force. Another important story: a bipartisan group of lawmakers introduced legislation this week to protect cadets at the Coast Guard Academy who report a sexual assault. The legislation is seeking to keep cadets from being disciplined for minor misconduct such as underage drinking. The change would put the Coast Guard Academy in line with policies at the other military academies. The Coast Guard is overseen by the Department of Homeland Security, unlike the other academies. Here's why it matters. The legislation comes after reports that the service did not disclose a 6-year investigation it conducted into dozens of cases of sexual assault and misconduct. The investigation spanned nearly 2 decades of allegations between 1988 and 2006. The Coast Guard also apologized for not taking action years ago when it failed to adequately handle cases of sexual assault and harassment. Senators Maria Cantwell of Washington and Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin said the committee, which has Coast Guard oversight, was not informed of the probe until an informal briefing with Senate staff. They demanded documents and records related to the investigation. The investigation, which was first reported by CNN, identified 62 substantiated incidents of rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment that occurred at the Coast Guard Academy or by Academy cadets. Democratic Rep. Joe Courtney's district includes the Academy. He said that the Pentagon implemented a policy change on sexual assault and harassment retaliation at its service academies, and the same must happen for the Coast Guard Academy. The Defense Authorization Bill in 2021 required the Pentagon to implement a policy for midshipmen or cadets who are victims of an alleged sexual assault and who have committed a minor offense. In other news, veterans are being asked to step up and work the polls in coming elections. It comes after a mass resignation of poll workers following threats against their lives. For more on this, military veterans and journalism fellow Nikki Wentling joins the episode today. So, Nikki, what happened to all of our poll workers?
Yeah, so, what we saw happen after the 2020 presidential election was widespread, baseless claims of election fraud cropped up. So those claims, really riled people up and resulted in thousands of election workers receiving threats, sometimes death threats against them and their families. And that sort of vitriol, along with concerns about the coronavirus pandemic back in 2020 caused a lot of poll workers to stop volunteering in their precincts. So that led to a shortage of poll workers during the 2022 midterms, and organizations that support polling places are worried about how it might affect the primaries and general election in 2024. So one group, We the Veterans, is launching an effort to get veterans and military family members to fill that void.
And so our elections really rely on the labor of young people and senior citizens. But now some are saying veterans should help keep our elections running smoothly. How are veterans the magic potion to help elections run smoothly?
Right. So, like I mentioned, We the Veterans is one big group that's really focused on getting veterans and military family members to work the polls. So you can go to their website and you can sign up and enter their database, and they'll, if you're a veteran or military family member, they'll let you know, if you're needed in that area that you live in. And so that group argues that veterans are involved in their communities at higher rates, and they're also accustomed to teamwork. So a lot of poll workers who didn't return after 2020 were, like you said, retired Americans who had been working the polls in their local jurisdictions for years and had built a rapport with each other. So now it's going to be more strangers coming together to do a job. And, that quality among veterans of being adept at teamwork is seen as being a really big, helpful asset. The other part of this is that threats and harassment against election workers aren't expected to go away. Experts have predicted there could be confrontations at the polls in 2024. And groups like We the Veterans and the Elections Group think that, by veterans being there and being a part of the voting process that so many people are skeptical of, that it actually might help other people trust the process too, and maybe prevent some of those conflicts from happening in the first place. Because as we know, veterans are often seen as trusted voices in their communities. So it's like getting their stamp of approval on the actual election process.
Thanks, Nikki. If you liked our conversation today, please like and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Also on the radar for today, the Biden administration approved a $500 million arms sale to Taiwan as it ramps up military assistance to the island despite fervent objections from China. The State Department said yesterday it signed off on the sale of infrared search tracking systems along with related equipment for advanced F-16 fighter jets. It said the sale also includes test support and equipment, computer software, and spare parts. Here's why it matters. The deal is modest in comparison to previous weapons sales, but the move is likely to draw fierce criticism from Beijing. China regards self-governing Taiwan as a renegade province and refuses to rule out the use of force to reunify it with the mainland. China has recently stepped up its military activity in the waters and skies around Taiwan, sending fighter jets and Navy vessels near the island or around it. Yesterday's State Department announcement follows an angry Chinese reaction to Taiwan's vice president stopping in the U.S. on his way to and from an official visit in Paraguay last week. And now, here are some other stories that we're hearing chirps about. Military.com is reporting that at least 6 Alaska National Guardsmen were attacked by coyotes during a rotation to the Joint Readiness Training Center in Louisiana in July. Georgia National Guardsmen recently arrived in the country of Georgia for the exercise Agile Spirit 2023. South Korea said that North Korea launched a long-range rocket. It could be the country's second attempt to put a spy satellite into orbit. And, in case you missed it, the Coast Guard rescued a man who was stranded for 3 days on an island in the Bahamas. And on this day in history, in 1821, Spain accepted Mexico's independence. After years of fighting for independence, the Viceroy of Mexico signed the Treaty of Cordoba, which made Mexico a constitutional monarchy. That's it for us this morning. To get more of the top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media @defense_news and @Military Times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted by me, Jonathan Lerfeld, and produced by Zimone Z. Perez. Today's episode features stories by The Associated Press and Nikki Wentling. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Roos. Have a great day.